Hello everyone, hello gamers, welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I've got my little tea. And today we are gonna go through my book collection. I've got quite a few books, and I'm kind of the person who, when I read a book, I usually tend to give it away, or donate it or something. And so most of these books I actually haven't read yet. Some of them I have. So, but, and you'll notice a theme, I think, throughout the books that might give you a little insight into my political ideology. But I think I've got some good books in here, and I thought I'd share with you. So, without further ado, we're gonna start with this one. So this is Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. Oh, sorry about the glare. You can see this beautiful cover that I found at a local bookstore actually recently, and it's still got, you know, the plastic on it, which I thought might be kind of nice. As profuse and original in invention as The Lord of the Rings. You know, this is, I actually have read this book before. It's an amazing book. It's quite, I would say, like ahead of its time, definitely pushing the boundaries of gender in sci-fi, and it really, I think, had an impact on me. And I remember I bought it for my dad for Christmas one year. I don't think he's read it, but maybe one day. But Ursula K. Le Guin is one of my favorite authors, and I just really like the cover of this one, like the big icicle with the dual faces. So, yeah. Next, we'll have another one. This is I bought from the same store. They have a bunch of these like older books, I would say, that are kind of wrapped up in plastic, and I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm collecting them, I guess. I'm not sure. But this one is The Pleasure Garden by Leon Garfield. I know nothing about this book. I basically just saw the cover. I judged the book by its cover and thought it looked amazing. And so, like, I love this knife, you know, just sticking into the ground, and big head. And it seems like there's some, like, I don't know, like, rizzing going on. The Pleasure Garden. Yeah, so it might be good. We'll see. I think it has, like, to me, it feels very like Garden of Eden-esque, you know? But I have no idea, so we'll see. All right, up next, we have a little pocket, John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. I studied philosophy in school, and this was probably the book that had the most inspiration on me, I would say, philosophically. John Stuart Mill's On Liberty in particular, I think, has a lot of interesting stuff to say. You can see I've actually got some notes in here. Wow. This is like a newer edition that I recently bought because I wanted to brush up, I guess, on some of my philosophy. But this one it's an amazing book, and if you haven't read any philosophy, this one is kind of dense, but it's almost like inspirational, I guess, is how I would describe this one. Like in a maybe a more intellectual way, but it's still, I think, had a pretty big impact on me, and so I recently bought this edition. Next is a book that I have read, and my friend actually got this for me for Christmas, maybe, or maybe it was my birthday. But I didn't know if I would like it, but I actually really did. It's Patti Smith's memoir, Just Kids, and you know, it's actually a beautiful tale. It does come off a little bit, I would say, pretentious. But I think it's also kind of like a beautiful story, and I think really, you know, Robert Mapplethorpe plays a huge role in this book and in Patti Smith's life, and you know, I would say like probably 70, if not 80% of the book is kind of dedicated to, you know, her relationship with Robert. And it has a Johnny Depp quote on the back. Patti Smith has graced us with a poetic masterpiece, a rare and privileged invitation to unlatch a treasure chest never before breached. Thanks, Johnny. That's funny. But yeah, this is a really good book. I've realized I've kind of gotten into memoirs recently in my older age, I guess. I think like as I get older, I start to like memoirs a little bit more. I'm not sure why, but I've noticed that. So, but yeah, this book it's really good. That's one of the books I have read. And this book is kind of like embarrassing, I guess. You know, Catcher in the Rye by DJ Salt and Vinegar is like, it's like a novel that I think like every indie boy has read, and has had like a profound impact on like every like young dude. And I'm not alone in that, you know, it's kind of like almost like cliche at this point, but I think The Catcher in the Rye is still, I think J.D. Salinger's dialogue is like, it's so incredible, and this book is, you know, like if you're an angsty boy, reading this like brings you so much catharsis, and it has helped me. I will be honest, which is a little embarrassing, but it's a good book actually, and I recommend reading it. I think that there's a lot of criticisms of this book, but which are all fair, but I think it's still worth a read. Yeah. Here is another book that I really love. Toni Morrison is probably one of my favorite authors. Her writing and her prose is so, it is quite dense, I would say, but if you take the time and like try not to rush through Toni Morrison's work, it's really revealing, incredibly poetic, and kind of just like, I don't know, piercing is the only way I can really describe it. And Beloved is one of her best, I would say. I love Beloved. It's definitely a hard read in terms of the subject matter, but it's also just like an incredible story. And I used to have a collection of Toni Morrison's stuff. I really love actually The Bluest Eye is a really good one, which I think is actually her first novel. if I'm not mistaken, but I had to get rid of a bunch of books when I moved, and this was one of them that I kept. So actually, I think this might be, oh yeah, it's my little brother's. See my high school there? Oops, that's fine. And then this is also sort of a relic from my days of philosophy. But this is, you can't really see, but Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. This is a hardcover edition that is, I'm gonna say, something I got for my birthday. And I read in college bits and pieces of The Brothers Karamazov. It had a huge impact on me, and I asked my parents for this book for Christmas, and they got it for me, and it's truly an amazing epic of, you know, three brothers who, say, like, one is definitely more of a succumbs to vices and is very passion focused. There's another brother who's more atheistic and scientific minded, and then there's one brother who's he's sort of the main character. His name's Alyosha, and he's more of a sort of like moral faith figure. He's like training to become a priest, I think. And it's, you know, filled with rich, I'd say, existential philosophy, religious philosophy, atheistic philosophy. Dostoevsky himself is deeply religious, but you see him grappling with his, and being skeptical of his religious ideas in this, and, you know, really, you know, trying to understand what it means to live in the world and be a human. And there's like, I mean, this book is, I mean, it's huge. You can see the text is quite small, right? But it is like an incredible book. Definitely a masterpiece, I would say. And one of my favorites. Okay, next up, we have a box set of The Lord of the Rings, and with this beautiful case, just like kind of amazing artwork. Got like the tree, and here's the side, and the front. My brother got me this actually for I think Christmas, maybe? I can't remember what. But here, I'll show you these guys. So, I've got the Fellowship. I've read the first two. I haven't read the third one yet. It's on my list. But I love this sort of like old artwork. It's really cute. But the first one is amazing. It's probably one of my favorite movies too. It's a great film. Two Towers. And I would say the books, if you haven't read the books and have only seen the movies, here's Return of the King. Love this. I'd say the books feel almost more lighthearted, I guess. You know, it's kind of like just a bunch of dudes, you know, going for a hike, going for a walk, and, you know, singing and having a good time. I mean, there's definitely like, you know, there's some, you know, darkness and, trials and tribulations, but I think overall it's um, quite lighthearted. Like, they're singing most of the time. They're just having fun. It's really hard to get the Hobbit spirits down, I would say. Okay, this is a recent pickup. I haven't read anything by Rosa Luxemburg, and so I thought this sort of like compilation of selected political writings might be a good start for me. And like her role in developing the German Revolution, and her contributions to Marxism, I think, are, from what I've heard, undeniable. And her critiques of Leninism, I think, might be good for me, I would say. So, don't know too much about Rosa Luxemburg, honestly, but I think this might help me. So that's why I got it. Excuse me. Next, I got this for Christmas this year, actually, which is a book that I've been wanting to read for so long now, I have to say. Vincent Bevins wrote The Jakarta Method, which is kind of like a book detailing the role of anti-communist practices and authoritarian practices all over the world, specifically in Indonesia, and how those anti-communist ideas in Indonesia sort of spread to other countries as well, and kind of became the blueprint for cracking down on communists. And he wrote this book. I think this is his most recent one. If We Burn, the Mass Protest Decade in the Missing Revolution, which I think is a very compelling idea. That I think the sort of main thrust of the book is that he focuses mainly outside of the US, I would say, and looking at the past decade as like one of immense protest, but no real substantive change coming out of that mass protest. No revolution, and it kind of, I think he discusses why that might be, and I think it has something to do with maybe some of the more horizontalism of these movements, but I don't know much about other revolutions in other countries, and so, or other protests in other countries, and so I think this might be a good start. And I really enjoyed the Jakarta Method, so yeah. Here's a book that my mother gave me. I don't know much about Fareed Zakaria, but I know he's a CNN guy, and so I feel like I probably won't agree a lot. I tend to not agree with a lot of the liberals, but maybe he might have some good ideas in here. I'm willing to give it a shot, and if anything, maybe reading through critically might be a interesting time. So Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the present. So we'll see. I think I'll definitely try and give this a read, and see exactly what this dude is on about. And I might be pleasantly surprised. Who knows? So there's that one. This is a book. I do a lot of reading of like halfway readings, and this is one of the books that I only read half of, which is, I think, a bad practice, and I need to get over that, but whatever. But this is Leon Trotsky's autobiography, My Life, a very innovative name. And I think, Trotskyists definitely get a lot of hate. But and I tend to not enjoy reading Trotsky. I find his writing kind of annoying, actually. But I do kind of agree. I think I would consider myself a Trotskyist. And so I was kind of interested in just his life, and so I got this, and I've only read half of it, but I will probably go back and read some more. So there's that. Okay, next up is another book I haven't read. This is what I got. I got this at a book exchange, which a socialist book exchange called the S Word. A short history of an American tradition, socialism. Don't know anything about this book, but I am quite interested in, you know, socialism from, or specifically American socialism and its history, and just like having a more robust understanding of, you know, the American tradition of socialism. And you know, Verso usually publishes some good books, so we'll see. Might be good. I'm not sure. This one's not really pressed on my list to read, but it's up there. Here's a book that definitely had a influence on me. I think a lot of like leftists would point to this book as part of like a sort of like political awakening for them, and I would say that it's definitely the case for me. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, which I haven't read all of either. It's quite a big book. There's lots of proper nouns, but definitely the parts I have read had pretty big impact on me in my political journey, and I think it's worth getting into. I think it would be good to read with other people, actually. So yeah, People's History. This is one that I also got from my mother for Christmas, The 100 Years' War on Palestine, which had definitely history of settler colonialism and resistance from 1917 to 2017 by Rashid Khalidi. Which this book was definitely going around during the height of the pro-Palestine protests, and it was a book that I would definitely wanted to read. I haven't read it yet, actually, but I definitely need to. And I've heard good things about it, so I think it's going to be a lot of proper nouns in this, and so it might take me a while to get through, because I don't know much about the history of Palestine at all, so yeah. This is a book that's, along with, I would say, John Stuart Mill in college. Paulo Freire had quite a big impact on me, and, you know, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. This is kind of like, you know, magnum, I would say. And he's like a Brazilian philosopher and activist and teacher, and here he really, I think, documents his understanding of a specific type of pedagogy, which is just like your teaching kind of philosophy, and I think definitely influenced my understanding of, like, you know, how people learn, how people achieve freedom, and maintain their freedom, especially through learning. And yeah, definitely and like, I think his critiques of like modern pedagogy, modern ways of teaching, is quite piercing and resonated with me a lot. The whole like banking system of education. But yeah, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Here's a couple books that I recently picked up from a friend, actually. This one I remember reading in high school, actually, nights, but I can't really remember too much about it. I know it's like quite poetic, and talks about his experience in concentration camps during World War II. But I think it'll be like quite a heavy read, but I think it's worth for sure reading. And then a poetry book, which I've been trying to get into poetry. I remember in high school I liked it a lot more. And so this was a book I picked up from a friend too, who recommended this poetry book, so we'll see. I kind of like the cover, I think it's cute. Here's a recent book, one of the most recent reads that I've read, Pride and Prejudice, and this book is amazing, honestly. I love this book. It's really great. The writing is so good. It's like, it's so witty and smart and hilarious. Definitely has a way with words. And I recently watched the movie as well, and the movie is like so good. Maybe I'll do a video on my movie collection, because I've got Pride and Prejudice in my movie collection as well. And I think this cover is hilarious, like person like this, so cute. So yeah, Pride and Prejudice, great book. I want to read some more Jane Austen. This is the first Jane Austen I've read, and it was amazing, so I think I'll have to read some more. Okay, next up is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. This is a book I got for Christmas this year as well. And this is like, I don't know much about this book, but from what I understand, it's kind of like, I think it's like ruminating about like, the effectiveness of climate change advocacy, and like kind of like I'm trying to articulate or discuss, at what point escalation of the climate emergency requires a sort of like reflective escalation in our movement, up to, blowing up a pipeline, right? Like, so yeah, learning from past struggles, breaking the spell, fighting despair. I've heard good things about this book, so I'm excited to read it. I haven't read it yet. This is a book, Animal Farm by George Orwell, that I read, I think last year now? Yeah, last year I picked this copy up. A little small, almost like pocket copy, because I don't think I had read it before. And maybe we had been assigned it in high school, but in high school I didn't read everything that was assigned. And so, this one is like a critique of Stalinism and critique of sort of degenerated worker state of the Soviet Union. And I think that like when I read this, there was like definitely, I was told that it would be a heavy critique of socialism, but honestly, reading it, I didn't feel like that really at all. And that there is like the main sort of like character, which Orwell puts up as like that there's this alternative socialist path, is Snowball, who's like I think is supposed to be Trotsky, and so it's like hey, yeah, Stalinism was bad, Stalinism was wrong, and there's another way to approach socialist transformation. And so I didn't feel it as quite the damning critique that it was led up to be, I guess. But a great, honestly, like a really fun read, having learned a little bit about the Russian Revolution now. This book was like incredibly enjoyable for me, and I love the cover. I think the cover's cute. Pink. This is a book that I bought alongside Animal Farm. Thomas Paine, who was a writer during the American Revolution, and really, I think, brought about Enlightenment thinking and Enlightenment ideas to the American colonies. And I think I bought this because I was really interested in the American Revolution, and just like the period of revolution and what it takes to instill revolutionary consciousness amongst a population who didn't necessarily, or wasn't necessarily ready for revolution at the time, or revolution wasn't like a majority of popular opinion, which is true for the American Revolution, and like how Thomas Paine had a role to play in sort of instigating that revolution. And also, I think I didn't read the entire thing. This is another book that I only read half of, but I do think he had some roles in the French Revolution as well. But he had this common sense was his sort of like, I think it was his like paper, his pamphlet that he would write. But he had some very like strong critiques of England and the English monarchy, and advocated for the American Revolution, and definitely played a role in it. And so I was kind of interested in that. So yeah, Thomas Paine. This is a book that I recently stopped reading. I only got halfway through. But like you can see, I got here, and then I watched the movie. But honestly, the movie like wasn't super true to the book. And so I might finish the book actually, because I'm kind of interested in how the book ends. I mean, I know that Catherine dies, but I'm curious exactly how that plays out. And so, yeah, and this book it's okay. Like, I thought it was going to be better, honestly. I think it's definitely like darker and richer than the movie, but I like the movie as well. But there's a character, Joseph, who's the sort of like groundskeeper guy, and he's like written with he's got like a dialect, or he's written to have a like an accent, and I cannot understand a word he says, basically, which is unfortunate. Or maybe he has like a lisp, I guess, and it's like written such that like phonetically, to attempt to capture that. And I have no idea what he's saying, and so I feel like sometimes I read it and I'm like, hey, and I hope I'm like not losing plot points because of it. But yeah, so maybe I'll go back and finish this. But it wasn't terrible. I thought it was okay. Here's another book that I've read half of, Teamster Rebellion, by Farrell Dobbs. This is sort of like a book about sort of Minnesota, I think in the 60s. Oh gosh, I don't know. Oh, 34. Okay. Yeah, leader of Farrell Dobbs was the sort of like, one of the central leaders of the Socialist Workers Party, and this kind of details his experience in Minnesota with a Teamsters strike, and it's like incredibly amazing. Oh yes, and this is sort of like paved the way for the rise of the CIO, which is now part of the, the AFL-CIO. But the CIO at the time was definitely a more militant, radical union construction in comparison to the AFL, and had different, I would say, like more class struggle tactics, and you can definitely see it in this book. And I think this is like a really rich piece of American history that is not taught in the sort of organizational capacity and like the passion of union workers and workers in general, and the successes that they had, but also the sacrifices that they had to make as well. It's quite an inspiring book, I would say. So I'm definitely going to read it. I think I want to read it with other people, though. I have this book, Lenin and the Revolutionary Party by Paul LeBlanc. I had a friend recommend me this book, and I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. I think I started it, but I want to get into it more. This is another book that I think would be helpful to read with someone else. I don't know like too much about Lenin as a figure, or the Bolshevik Party. Only sort of like bits and pieces, but I definitely want to learn more. And so I think this will be a good start for me. Here's a book I read recently, finished Asada Shakur's autobiography. Incredible book. I read this right after reading Malcolm X's autobiography, and I think those two in combination were like really cool. Definitely like the sort of, I think Asada's kind of like the evolution of the sort of black nationalist black radical movement coming out of Malcolm X's tradition. And Asada was a member of the Black Panther Party, and then actually stepped back from the Black Panther Party. And this book is like incredibly engaging too. Like, it's written in such an entertaining way, and just like her life itself is wild and crazy, and so yeah, I highly recommend. It's an incredibly entertaining read, if anything. So. Here's another book. The Bolsheviks Come to Power, which is kind of like, by Alexander Rabinovich, and talking about the 1917 revolution, and the role that the Bolsheviks played specifically, which is kind of like, also a book that I wanted to, brush up on, because I don't know too much about that history, and I feel like it's an important one. So. Here's another book that I'm planning to read with a few folks coming up. How Socialists Beat Amazon and Upended Big City Politics. We're Coming for You in Your Rotten System by Jonathan Rosenblum. That I recently picked up. And it's kind of about socialist alternative, and Kshama Sawant, who was a Seattle City Council member, who ran on a independent socialist campaign, and won incredible gains like a tax on Amazon, renter rights, increasing the minimum wage of the first major city to win a $15 an hour minimum wage, and sort of the struggle to get there. And it had definitely ramifications across the country, and so now a lot of major cities have $15 an hour minimum wages, and so I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning on reading it with a few folks, so I think it'll be good. Okay. I mentioned Jane Austen earlier, and so I really like Pride and Prejudice, and so I wanted to get another Jane Austen to read. So I got Emma. I haven't read this one, don't know much about it. I think that there's been a lot of like modern retellings of the story. And so maybe I kind of know the story already, but I'm not sure. But I wanted to get it, and I liked this cover. I thought this cover was pretty beautiful. And now Martyr, which is a book that I think was popular. Did it come out last year? But it got quite a few awards. I remember it kind of buzzing, getting some buzz. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know much about it. But yeah, I'm excited to read it. I've heard good things, so. And this will be the last book for today. Lisa Murkowski, who's a Alaska senator. I'm from Alaska. My mom bought me this because she knows I'm political, and so she thought I might enjoy this, which I feel like I might. I mean, I don't agree with Lisa Murkowski's politics as much, but I think it'll be interesting to read. Oh God, it's got Joe Manchin on here. And Mitt Romney. Oh God. Oh Jesus. But whatever, I think it'll be an entertaining read for sure. So yeah. Well, that is it for my book collection. So I might do another one of these like in the future if I get more books, or give some away. But yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you, gamers, and goodbye.